The silence in the Liu mansion is never truly quiet. It's a heavy, pressurized hum of expensive air conditioning and the ticking of a grandfather clock that costs more than a suburban apartment. I sat at the head of a mahogany dining table laid for two, the silver clinking softly as I adjusted a single white rose in a crystal vase. Today was our 5th wedding anniversary, 5 years of being the invisible Mrs. Liu. My phone vibrated on the silk tablecloth. It wasn't a text from my husband, Liu Xiang. It was a push notification from a celebrity gossip app. Diamond King Liu Xiang spends 10 million on blue heart necklace for Muse Wei at charity gala. There was a photo. Liu Xiang, with his signature frost-cold expression and tailored charcoal suit, was leaning slightly toward Yi Wei. He looked like a god carved from marble, beautiful, distant, and utterly untouchable. Yi Wei was radiant, her hand resting provocatively on his sleeve. The diamond glowing like a trophy around her neck. I looked down at my own reflection in the polished soup spoon. I looked pale, my hair pulled back into a perfect, obedient bun. For 5 years, I had played the role of the submissive, quiet wife who never asked questions and never made the news. I was the security he came home to when he was tired of the cameras, except tonight. He wasn't coming home. Mommy, is Daddy coming to see my drawing? I looked up. My 4-year-old daughter, Nian Nian, was standing in the doorway, clutching a piece of paper. Her eyes were red. Nian Nian, why aren't you asleep? I hurried over, kneeling to her level. She sniffled, holding out the drawing. It was a picture of 3 people, but the figure of the father was scribbled over with black crayon. The kids at preschool said I'm a liar. They said I don't have a daddy because he never picks me up. They said I'm a hidden mistake. My heart didn't break, it turned into a shard of ice. This wasn't the first time. Liu Xiang insisted on keeping our marriage a secret for the sake of the company's stock stability. But in reality, he just didn't want the world to know he was tethered to a woman who brought him no political or social leverage. He wanted the freedom of a bachelor and the comfort of a maid. You aren't a mistake, Nian Nian, I whispered, my voice steady despite the roar in my ears. You are the only thing in this house that is real. I tucked her into bed, whispering promises I finally intended to keep. As I walked back through the hollowed-out grandeur of the hallway, the front door surged open. Liu Xiang walked in. The scent of expensive sandalwood and a hint of Yi Wei's floral perfume followed him like a shroud. He didn't look at the candles or the cold dinner. He began unbuttoning his cuffs, his movements precise and chilly. Why are the lights still on? He asked, his voice a low, baritone rasp that used to make my heart flutter. Now. It just felt like a draft from a tomb. It's our anniversary. Xiang, I said, standing by the table. He paused, a flicker of something, boredom, perhaps, crossing his handsome face. I told Assistant Lin to send you a gift. Did you not receive the bag? I don't want a bag. I wanted you to see Nian Nian. She was bullied today because of the secret you're keeping. Liu Xiang finally turned to look at me. His eyes were like deep alpine lakes, beautiful, but frozen solid. Lin Shanshan. We had an agreement. I provide the life, the status, and the protection. You provide the stability. If the children at a preschool are talking, change the preschool. Don't bring petty drama to me after a 14-hour workday. Petty drama. I walked closer. I could see the faint shimmer of diamond dust on his lapel, likely from Yi Wei's necklace. Your daughter is being called a hidden mistake while you're out buying $10 million diamonds for a muse. Is that part of the stability? He stepped into my personal space, his height intimidating. He smelled of power and indifference. Yi Wei is an asset to the Liu Group's branding. You are a wife who stays at home. Know your place. Shanshan, if you're unhappy with their invisible life, remember where I found you. He meant the orphan with the scholarship whom he rescued into a golden cage. He thought I owed him my soul for the roof over my head. I know exactly where I am, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. He gave a dismissive grunt and headed toward the stairs. Good, I'm going to the study. Don't disturb me. I watched him go. The man I had loved for 7 years and been married to for 5 didn't even realize that the woman standing in his dining room was no longer his wife. She was his accountant, and she was starting the audit. I waited until I heard the heavy thud of his study door. Then, I sat back down at the table. I didn't cry. I pulled out a hidden folder from the sideboard documents I had been preparing in secret for months. I opened my laptop and logged into a private portal. Property assessment. Lu Mansion. Title held in the name of Lin Shanshan per 2021 tax restructuring. Current market value, 180 million. Lu Xiang had put the house in my name years ago to shield it from a potential lawsuit during a hostile takeover attempt. He was so arrogant, so sure of my devotion, that he never bothered to move it back to him. I was just a safe deposit box that didn't have a key. I picked up my phone and sent a message to a contact I'd saved as nursery. Everything is ready. Start the valuation of the secondary properties. I want the liquid assets moved by the end of the month. Auntie Chen, the housekeeper who had been with me since Nian Nian was born, crept into the room. She saw the papers, her eyes widening. She knew the truth of this marriage better than anyone. Madam, are you sure? She whispered. Auntie Chen. Look at this house, I said, gesturing to the cold marble and the dark corners. It's a museum of my wasted youth. I'm not going to let Nian Nian become an exhibit in it. The conflict wasn't just with Xiang, it was with the world he had built around me. Tomorrow, the bullying at school would likely continue. Tomorrow, Yi Wei would post another photo of her mysterious benefactor. But for the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel the sting. I picked up the white rose from the table and snapped the stem. I walked to the kitchen and began systematically pouring the expensive 1982 Bordeaux I had opened for the anniversary down the drain. Glug, glug, glug. Thousands of dollars worth of liquid arrogance disappeared into the pipes. I heard footsteps. Lu Xiang was standing at the kitchen entrance, his tie discarded, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked at me, then at the empty bottle. That was a gift from the French ambassador. He said, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion. What are you doing? It turned sour, I said, meeting his gaze with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Sometimes, Xiang, things look expensive and perfect on the outside, but they've been rotting for a long time. You just don't notice until you pour it out. He stared at me, his cold eyes searching for the flicker of hurt he usually feasted on. He found nothing, no tears, no pleading, no anger, just a terrifying, placid calm. You're acting strange, he muttered, stepping toward the fridge for a bottle of water. Go to sleep. You're clearly emotional because of the date. You're right, I said, tucking a stray hair behind my ear. I've never felt more emotional in my life. As he turned his back to me, I took a photo of the blue heart diamond on my phone screen and then a photo of the signed asset assessment on my table. The contrast was poetic. I went to the living room and looked at the large oil painting of us that hung over the fireplace. Lu Xiang was looking at the camera. I was looking at him. I reached up and tilted the frame just an inch. The perfection was skewed. I went upstairs to Nian Nian's room. She was asleep, her small hand gripping a stuffed rabbit. I sat on the edge of her bed and pulled out my tablet, opening a folder of brochures. Interlaken, Switzerland, schools for international students, the alpine air, the privacy. Lu Xiang thought I was a bird in a cage. He didn't realize I was the one who held the deed to the cage. And I was about to sell the bars for scrap metal. Before I closed my eyes that night, I sent one last email to my lawyer. Draft the relinquishment of marital status, but don't send it to him. I want him to find out from the new owners of his house. The silence of the Lu mansion was no longer heavy. It was the silence of a fuse burning down toward a mountain of dynamite. The morning sun hit the marble floors of the Lu mansion with a clinical, cold brilliance. Lu Xiang had already left for the office, likely to handle the PR fallout of his late-night jewelry spree with Yi Wei. He didn't say goodbye. He never did. To him, I was part of the architecture, reliable, silent, and permanent. I spent the morning in the garden with Nian Nian. She was coloring, her small face focused. Mommy, are we going to the park today? Better than the park, sweetheart, I whispered, stroking her hair. We're going to a place with mountains that touch the clouds. My phone buzzed. It was Manager Zhao, a high-stakes real estate broker known for moving problematic luxury assets quietly. I stepped into the greenhouse, the scent of lilies thick and suffocating. Mrs. Lu. Zhao's voice was slick. I have a buyer, a private equity mogul from the north. He's looking for a trophy property and he's willing to pay a 15% premium for a fast, cash-only closing. But he wants to inspect the grounds this afternoon. Do it, I said, my voice as steady as a surgeon's. Lu Xiang will be at a board meeting until 8 p.m. Use the side entrance. And Zhao, if a single word of this reaches the Lu Group's ears before the funds are in escrow, You'll lose more than just your commission. Understood, madam. Discretion is my middle name. I hung up, only to see a sleek black Bentley pulling into the driveway. It wasn't Xiang, it was a car I recognized with a visceral shudder. My mother-in-law, Madame Lu. She stepped out, draped in pearls and an aura of effortless disdain. She didn't knock. She walked into the house like she was inspecting a low-tier hotel. Lin Shanshan, she called out, her voice echoing in the foyer. I met her in the living room. Mother, to what do I owe the surprise? She didn't sit, she paced the length of the Persian rug, her eyes landing on the anniversary flowers I hadn't thrown away yet. I saw the news about Xiang and Yi Wei. I trust you aren't planning on making a scene. Xian's career is at a delicate stage. A stable marriage, even a silent one, is essential for the upcoming merger. I haven't said a word. Mother, good, she turned to me, her lip curling. You've always been a sensible girl. You knew when you married him that you were a placeholder. You provided a grandchild, and for that, the Lu family is grateful. But don't mistake Xian's tolerance for love. He needs a woman who can stand beside him in the light, not someone who hides in the shadows of this house. I felt a surge of cold fury, but I forced my features into a mask of submissive hurt. I understand, I'm just tired, mother. Sometimes I feel like this house is too big for just me and Nian Nian. Then find a hobby, she snapped, and tell that daughter of yours to stop crying at school. It reflects poorly on Xian's genes. If she can't handle a few comments from classmates, she isn't fit for the Lu name. I felt my fingernails dig into my palms. She isn't fit for the name. Good, because I'm taking the name away from her. You're right, I said softly. I'll make sure Nian Nian doesn't reflect poorly on the family ever again. See that you do. Madame Lu checked her diamond-encrusted watch. I'm meeting Yi Wei for tea. She has a much better grasp of social etiquette than you do. Don't wait up for Xiang. He's taking us both out to dinner. She swept out of the house, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and poison in her wake. I waited until her car cleared the gates before I pulled my recording pen out of my pocket. Every word of her disdain, every admission that I was a placeholder, was captured. In a divorce court, this was evidence of emotional abuse. In the court of public opinion, it was a lethal weapon. 2 hours later, Manager Zhao arrived with the buyer, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Han. He was Lu Xian's primary competitor in the tech sector. I knew exactly what I was doing. Selling the Lu family's ancestral seat to their biggest rival was the ultimate insult. The layout is perfect, Mr. Han remarked, trailing his hand over the mahogany banister. But I heard Mr. Lu is quite fond of this estate. Why the sudden sale? Mr. Lu is looking for a change of pace, I said, offering a practiced, enigmatic smile. He finds the memories here a bit too crowded. We're looking for something much more private. Perhaps international. I see. Han looked at me, a glint of respect in his eyes. He wasn't a fool. He saw the empty shelves where my personal belongings used to be. And the price? 180 million is a lot of cash to move in 48 hours. If you can close by Friday, I'll include the vintage wine cellar and the art collection, I countered. But the deed must be transferred to your offshore holding company immediately. I want this off my books before the weekend. Deal. As they signed the preliminary intent papers in the dining room, the very table where I had sat alone the night before, my heart hammered against my ribs. I was selling the roof over Lu Xian's head while he was out dining with his mistress and his mother. Just as Mr. Han was leaving, the front door opened. My blood turned to ice. It was Lu Xiang. He was early. He froze in the foyer, his gaze darting from me to Manager Zhao, and finally to Mr. Han. His eyes narrowed, the temperature in the room dropping 20 degrees. Han. Xian's voice was a low growl. What are you doing in my house? Mr. Han smirked, tucking his pen into his breast pocket. Just admiring the architecture. Lu, your wife has impeccable taste. She was just showing me the potential of the estate. Xiang stepped forward, his presence suffocating. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine with a sudden, sharp intensity. Shanshan, what is he talking about? I didn't blink. I stepped forward, playing the part of the flustered, innocent housewife. Oh, Xiang, you're home early. Mr. Han is interested in the charity auction I'm organizing. I was just showing him the house as a potential venue for the gala. Since you're so busy with Yi Wei's branding, I thought I'd take initiative. The lie was bold, But it played perfectly into his perception of me as a bored woman trying to gain his approval. Xian's tension didn't fully dissipate, but his ego took the bait. He looked at Han with pure territorial aggression. The Lu Mansion is not a venue, it's a private residence. Get out, Han, now. Han laughed, a dry, knowing sound. Of course, I've seen everything I need to see, Mrs. Lu. I'll be in touch about the donation details. Once the door closed, Xiang turned on me. He grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to bruise, but enough to show his dominance. Are you out of your mind? Inviting Han here? He's been trying to dismantle my supply chain for 3 years. I just wanted to be useful, Xiang. I said, my voice trembling slightly, a calculated tremor. Your mother said I was a placeholder. I thought if I raised enough money for the charity, you'd be proud of me. I thought you'd finally take me to a gala instead of her. I looked up at him, letting a single tear track down my cheek. Xiang stared at me, his grip loosening. For a second, a flash of something, guilt, annoyance, flickered in his eyes. He let go of my arm and sighed, the sound of a man burdened by an inferior subordinate. My mother shouldn't have said that, he muttered, though he didn't contradict her words. But stay away from Han, he's dangerous. If you want to do charity work, talk to my secretary, he'll give you a list of approved foundations. Okay, I whispered, looking down at my shoes. I'm sorry, Xiang, go upstairs. He commanded, already pulling out his phone to check his emails. I have a conference call, and tell the kitchen I'm not eating. The dinner with my mother and Yi Wei was long. I nodded and turned away. As I climbed the stairs, the submissive look vanished from my face, replaced by a cold, calculating grin. He had no idea. He thought he had just scolded a disobedient pet. He didn't realize that the pet had just sold the kennel to his worst enemy. I locked my bedroom door and pulled out my laptop. Message from bank. Wire transfer initiated. Pending final signature. I looked at the sleeping Nian Nian on the monitor of the baby cam. Soon, Nian Nian. I whispered to the screen. Soon we won't have to hide in the shadows. We'll be the ones who own the light. The conflict was escalating. Xiang was suspicious. His mother was circling like a shark, and the clock was ticking. I had 3 days to finalize the sale, pack our lives into 4 suitcases, and disappear before the Blue Heart diamond was even paid for. I opened a drawer and took out our passports. I ran my thumb over the gold-embossed seal. Lu Xiang thought he was the master of this world. He didn't realize I had already checked out of his reality. Tomorrow was the charity gala, the scene of his greatest public triumph, and the place where I would plant the seeds of his total ruin. I lay down in the oversized bed, the silk sheets feeling like a shroud. I didn't sleep. I listened to the sound of Xian's voice in the study, barking orders, building an empire that was already missing its foundation. The house felt lighter already. It was no longer a home, it was just a pile of stone and wood that belonged to Mr. Han. I closed my eyes and imagined the crisp, cold air of the Swiss Alps. The Grand Hyatt ballroom was a cathedral of excess. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen explosions, casting a jagged light over the cream of the city's elite. I stood in the shadow of a marble pillar, wearing a dress Lu Xiang had chosen for me, a muted, high-necked navy silk that made me look like a Victorian governess compared to the peacocks preening on the dance floor. Remember, Lu Xian's voice was a cold whisper in my ear as he adjusted his cufflinks. You are here as my executive assistant tonight. If anyone asks about our connection, you are a distant relative handling my family's philanthropic wing. Yi Wei is the face of the evening. Don't embarrass her. I wouldn't dream of it, I said. My voice as smooth as the champagne I wasn't drinking. Across the room, Yi Wei was a vision in crimson. The Blue Heart diamond throbbed at her throat like a neon sign of my husband's infidelity. She was surrounded by cameras, laughing at something Mother Lu was whispering in her ear. They looked like a family. I looked like the help. Go and check the auction items, Xiang commanded. The Swiss consul, Mr. Hoffman, is interested in the antique watch collection. Ensure the provenance papers are laid out perfectly. I need his support for the Zurich expansion. I nodded and moved through the crowd. This was the moment. Xiang thought he was using me to secure a business deal. He didn't realize I had been studying Swiss immigration law and banking regulations for 6 months. I didn't need the watch collection, I needed the man holding the pen. I found Mr. Hoffman near the balcony, looking bored by the sycophants circling him. I approached him. not with the stuttering nerves of a distant relative, but with the poise of a woman who had nothing left to lose. The 1924 Patek Philippe is in the third case, Mr. Hoffman, I said in fluent, polished German, but I suspect a man of your taste is more interested in the quiet stability of the cantons than the loud display of a ballroom. Hoffman turned, his eyebrows shooting up. Your German is impeccable, Fräulein, Lin Shanshan, and it's Madam, I corrected softly. Though I didn't specify whose. I've been looking into investment migration in Vaud. The privacy laws are quite attractive for a woman in my position. As we spoke, I felt a predatory gaze on my back. I turned to see Yi Wei approaching, her crimson dress swishing like a warning. She was holding a glass of red wine, her eyes narrowed with territorial spite. She hated that I was talking to someone important. Shanshan, Yi Wei chirped, her voice high and performative. Xiang was looking for you. He said the guest list in the VIP lounge is a mess. You really should focus on your chores instead of bothering the consul. She turned to Hoffman, flashing a dazzling, artificial smile. I'm so sorry, Mr. Hoffman. Shanshan is a bit of a charity case herself, a distant cousin we took in. She lacks the social polish for these events. I saw Hoffman's expression stiffen. He was a diplomat. He recognized a bully when he saw one. On the contrary, Hoffman said coldly, Madam Lin has been most enlightening. Yi Wei's smile faltered. She looked at my navy dress, then at her own reflection in the glass, and decided to escalate. She stepped closer, pretending to stumble. Oh, my heel. She tipped her glass, the dark red wine arching toward my navy silk. It was a classic. Petty move to humiliate me and force me to leave the floor, but I had been watching her reflection in the pillar. I didn't move away. Instead, I stepped into her space, catching her wrist with a grip of iron. The wine didn't hit my dress. It splashed violently across the front of her white gold lace bodice and, more importantly, directly onto the blue heart diamond. Oh dear, I whispered, loud enough for the nearby photographers to turn. Yi Wei, you really must be more careful. That diamond is far too heavy for someone so delicate. Yi Wei let out a strangled shriek. The red wine looked like a bloodstain across her chest. The cameras began to flash. The muse of the Lu group was now a dripping mess in the center of the ballroom. What is going on here? The crowd parted. Lu Xiang arrived, his face a mask of suppressed rage. He looked at Yi Wei's ruined dress, then at me. His eyes were lethal. She tripped me, Yi Wei wailed, her eyes brimming with fake tears. Xiang, look at my dress, look at the necklace. Xiang stepped toward me, his voice a low, dangerous vibration. Shanshan, apologize. Now, I stood my ground, my heart racing but my head clear. I was merely trying to steady her. Xiang, Mr. Hoffman saw the whole thing. Perhaps the muse has had a bit too much to drink. Hoffman stepped forward, his voice booming. Indeed, the young lady seemed quite unsteady on her feet. Madam Lin was merely being helpful. Xiang froze. He couldn't contradict the Swiss consul without jeopardizing the very deal he had come here to make. He looked at the cameras, then at the ruined Yi Wei, and finally back at me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine confusion in his eyes. He didn't recognize this version of me, the woman who didn't shrink under his glare. Assistant Lin, Xiang said, his voice straining with the effort to remain professional. Take Miss Yi to the dressing room, get her cleaned up. Actually, Xiang, I said, leaning in so only he could hear, I have a better idea. Why don't you take her? It would look so devoted for the press. I'll stay here and finish the negotiations with Mr. Hoffman. Since I'm the only one who speaks his language. Xian's jaw tightened so hard I heard the bone click. He was trapped. He had to choose between his mistress's ego and the Zurich expansion. Fine, he spat. He grabbed Yi Wei's arm, not gently, and began to lead her away. As they walked off, I turned back to Hoffman. I pulled a small, elegant envelope from my clutch. My apologies for the drama, Mr. Hoffman. High society is so performative. Regarding the Zurich expansion and my own private interests, perhaps we could discuss the final documentation over a quiet coffee tomorrow. I have the asset declarations ready. Hoffman smiled, a genuine, knowing look. You are a very strategic woman, Madam Lin. I think Switzerland will suit you much better than this circus. I agree, I said. The rest of the night was a blur of high-stakes networking. I moved through the room like a ghost, invisible no more, but a shadow that everyone was suddenly trying to catch. I spoke to CEO Han, the man who was buying my house. We exchanged a brief, curt nod, the silent pact of two predators. By the time Xiang returned to the floor, Yi Wei had been sent home in a car, and I was deep in conversation with the head of a major international school. Xiang walked up to me. His aura dark and suffocating. He didn't care about the gala anymore. He grabbed my elbow and pulled me toward the exit. "We're leaving," he snapped. He didn't speak in the car. The silence was a physical weight between us. He stared out the window, his profile sharp and cold against the passing city lights. When we reached the mansion, he didn't wait for the driver to open the door. He stormed inside, and I followed, my heels clicking on the marble like a countdown. In the foyer, he turned on me. "What was that tonight? The German, the confidence. Since when do you handle diplomats?" "Since I realized that if I didn't handle them, no one would handle me," I said, unpinning the navy silk shawl from my shoulders. "You embarrassed Yi Wei. You made a scene in front of the press. I saved your deal with Hoffman, Xiang. If I hadn't stepped in, he would have walked away after seeing your muse act like a petulant child. You should be thanking me." He stepped closer, pinning me against the mahogany door of his study. He smelled of sweat and expensive gin. "I don't thank employees for doing their jobs, Shanshan. And make no mistake, you are an extension of me, nothing more. Don't let a little attention from a consul go to your head. An extension of you." I laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "Is that why you won't even tell people I'm your wife? Is that why Nian Nian is a secret? Nian Nian is protected?" He roared, his composure finally cracking. "This world is dangerous. If the rivals knew I had a weakness," I interrupted. "Is that what we are to you? A weakness? Or just a liability you haven't figured out how to write off yet?" He stared at me, his eyes burning with a dark, frustrated fire. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me or kill me. Instead, he let go of my arms and stepped back, as if I had suddenly become radioactive. "Go to bed," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I have work to do. And stay away from the guest wing. My mother is staying over, and she's in a foul mood thanks to your little stunt." "Of course, Xiang," I said, smoothing my dress. "I'll stay exactly where I belong." I walked away, but I didn't go to bed. I went to the nursery. I sat in the dark, watching Nian Nian sleep. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally fading. I pulled out my phone, a new message from the Swiss consulate. "Meeting confirmed for 10:00 a.m. Bring the passports." I looked at the wedding ring on my finger. The diamond was small, modest, nothing like the blue heart. It was a symbol of a promise that had been broken 1,000 times. I took it off and placed it on the nightstand. The gala wasn't just a trap for Yi Wei. It was my audition for my new life, and according to Mr. Hoffman, I had passed with flying colors. Tomorrow, the liquidation of the Lu family assets would begin in earnest, and Lu Xiang, he was still worried about a wine stain on a diamond. He was looking at the sparks. He didn't see the wildfire. The morning after the gala, the Lu mansion felt like a pressure cooker. Lu Xiang was gone before dawn, leaving behind a house that hummed with the nervous energy of a storm about to break. I stood in the master bedroom, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as two unmarked white vans pulled into the secondary driveway. "The pest control is here, madam," Auntie Chen whispered at my door, her voice trembling. "Good," I said, not turning around. "Make sure the kitchen staff stays in the back wing. Give them the morning off if you have to. I want no witnesses." The pest control workers were actually professional appraisers and movers from a high-end auction house. As they began tagging the rare vases and the French Impressionist paintings Xiang had bought as investments, my phone chimed. It was a frantic call from Assistant Lin, Xian's right-hand man. "Mrs. Lu, I'm sorry to bother you, but Mr. Lu he's seen the social media trends. There's a rumor that the Lu residence is being surveyed. Some neighbors reported seeing trucks. Mr. Lu is in a meeting with the board, but has already sent a security team to check the perimeter." My heart did a slow, heavy roll in my chest. Too soon. I had expected at least 8 hours of silence. "It's just a deep clean, Assistant Lin," I said, my voice dripping with bored, housewife annoyance. "The gala last night made me realize how dusty this place has become. I've hired a specialized team to handle the antique tapestries. Tell Xiang not to worry unless he wants to come home and help me scrub the floors." I heard Assistant Lin exhale in relief. I'll relay the message, madam. He's quite preoccupied anyway. Miss Yees, jewelry incident has caused a bit of a PR nightmare. The diamond sponsorship is being questioned. How tragic, I murmured and hung up. I turned to the lead appraiser. Speed it up. I want the art out of here in 2 hours. Use the service elevator. As they worked, I sat at Shien's heavy oak desk in his study, the inner sanctum I was rarely allowed to enter. I logged into his personal computer. I didn't need to hack it. I had watched him type his password, the date of his company's founding, never our anniversary, 100 times. I found what I was looking for, the digital certificates for the Blue Heart diamond. Yi Wei thought she owned that necklace. In reality, it was a lease-to-own agreement under the Lu Group's marketing budget. With a few clicks, I leaked an anonymous tip to a rival fashion blogger. The Blue Heart is a rental. The Lu Group is facing a liquidity crisis and can't actually afford the purchase. It was a lie. Of course, Lu Xiang had plenty of money, but in the world of high finance, a rumor of a liquidity crisis is as good as a death warrant. While the market panicked, Xiang would be forced to dump assets to prove his solvency. Suddenly, the study door slammed open. I didn't jump. I slowly closed the laptop and looked up. It wasn't Xiang. It was Mother Lu, her face contorted with rage, clutching a tablet. What is this? She hissed, shoving the screen in my face. It was the liquidity crisis headline, already spreading like wildfire. Xiang is in a board meeting being crucified by investors, and I come here to find men carrying out the Ming Dynasty vases. Have you lost your mind? Shanshan. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I didn't look like the terrified girl she had bullied yesterday. I looked like the owner of the room. The vases are being sent for restoration, Mother, I said calmly. And as for the news, well, perhaps Xiang shouldn't have spent 10 million on a necklace when the company's quarterly reports were so thin. It looks desperate, don't you think? You dare judge him? She stepped forward, her hand raised as if to strike me. You are nothing. You are a shadow we allowed to live in this house. I will have Xiang throw you out on the street by tonight. On what grounds? I asked, tilting my head. The house is in my name, the art. Most of it was gifted to the wife of Lu Xiang, that's me. If you want me to leave, I'll take the walls with me. Her hand froze in midair, her eyes darted around the room, finally noticing the empty spots on the shelves. You're selling it. You're actually selling it all. I'm liquidating, I corrected. There's a difference. One is an ending, the other is a beginning. She lunged for the phone on the desk to call Xiang, but I grabbed her wrist. I was younger, stronger, and fueled by 5 years of suppressed loathing. Don't, I whispered, if you call him now, I'll release the recording of you calling Nian Nian a hidden mistake and saying she wasn't fit for the Lu name. Do you think the board of directors will appreciate the grandmother of the Lu heir trashing the family bloodline? Do you think the stability Xiang craves will survive a child abuse scandal? Mother Lu turned a sickly shade of grey. She began to tremble, her bravado shattering like cheap glass. You wouldn't. Try me. I let go of her wrist. Now, go to your room and stay there. I have a lot of pest control to finish. She backed away, stumbling over her own heels, and fled the room. I sat back down, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The adrenaline was a drug. I pulled up my personal bank portal. The 180 million from Mr. Han was sitting in a holding account, waiting for the final Swiss confirmation. I initiated the transfer. Destination, Credit Suisse, Zurich. Amount, $180, 000, Status, in progress. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 10%, 30%. My phone rang. It was Lu Xiang. I let it ring. It rang again, and again. On the 4th time, I picked up. Shanshan, he roared. His voice was chaotic, a sound I had never heard from the Ice King. What the hell is going on? The stock is plummeting. My mother is hysterical, screaming about restoration and recordings. And Assistant Lin says the house security system has been bypassed. It's just a busy morning. Xiang, I said, watching the progress bar, 65%. Did you see the news about the diamond? Yi Wei must be so embarrassed. People think you're broke. I don't care about the diamond. I'm coming home, right now. If I find one person in that house who shouldn't be there, I'll have them arrested. And Shanshan, if you've touched my files, I haven't touched your files. Xiang, I said truthfully. I don't need them, I have my own. Stay there, he commanded. Don't you dare leave that house. 95%, 99%, transfer complete. I'm not going anywhere. Xiang, I said, a genuine smile finally breaking across my face. I'll be right here, waiting for the end. I hung up and looked at the appraiser. Is the truck loaded? Yes, madam. The last of the art is secured. Move out, I ordered. And tell manager Zhao to send the final welcome package to Mr. Han. The house is officially his. I walked out of the study and down the grand staircase. The house was echoing now, stripped of its soul. The rugs were gone, the walls were bare, and the air smelled of dust and departure. I went to Nian Nian's room. She was sitting on her bed, her small backpack on her shoulders. Is it time, mommy? Almost, baby. We just have to say goodbye to the ghost. I heard the screech of tires in the driveway. A black SUV slammed to a halt. Lu Xiang was home. I met him in the foyer. He burst through the door, his suit disheveled, his eyes wild. He stopped, his jaw dropping as he looked around the empty hall. He looked like a man who had walked into a dream that had turned into a vacuum. Where is everything? He whispered. I told you, Xiang, I said, standing in the center of the emptiness. Things look perfect on the outside, but they've been rotting for a long time. I just finished the cleaning. He turned to me, his face twisting into something terrifying. Lin Shanshan, what have you done? I've settled the accounts, I said, and Xiang, your guest is here. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mr. Han standing there, a group of burly men in black suits behind him. He held up a legal folder and smiled. Afternoon, Lu, Han said, his voice echoing in the hollow room. I believe you're in my foyer. My movers will be here at 4 p.m. to start the renovations. I'm thinking of turning your study into a walk-in humidor. Xiang looked from Han to me, the realization finally hitting him like a physical blow. The invisible wife hadn't just left. She had dismantled his kingdom from the inside out. The silence that followed my words was deafening. Lu Xiang stood frozen, his eyes darting between the empty walls and Mr. Han's smug expression. The Ice King was finally cracking, the frost in his gaze replaced by a raw, bewildered fury. The house is in Shanshan's name, Xiang said, his voice trembling as he tried to grasp at the remnants of his logic. But the contents, the art, the furniture, that belongs to the Lu Group, you can't just sell it, Mr. Han let out a short, barking laugh. He pulled a document from his folder and tapped it. Actually, Lu, according to the gift deeds filed over the last 4 years. Every piece of art in this building was gifted to Lin Shanshan for emotional labor and marital support. Your own tax accountant signed off on it to lower your personal asset bracket. It's all legal, it's all hers. And now, it's all mine. Xiang turned to me, his face pale. Shanshan, how long? How long have you been planning this? Since the day you told me that Nian Nian was a secret that needed to be kept for the sake of your stock price, I said. My voice as cold as a mountain stream. You treated us like liabilities. Xiang, I just decided to liquidate the debt. Before he could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the hospital where Nian Nian had been taken for a checkup earlier that morning. She had developed a high fever, the stress of the last few days finally catching up to her small body. I have to go, I said, stepping past him. You aren't going anywhere. Xiang grabbed my arm, his grip desperate. We are going to sit down, we are going to call the lawyers, and you are going to undo this. Let go of her, Lu. Han stepped forward, his men moving in behind him. You're trespassing on my property now. If you don't leave, I'll have my security escort you out, and I'll make sure the press is outside to catch the liquidity crisis CEO being kicked out of his own home. Xian's hand dropped. He looked at Han, then at me, and I saw the defeat in his eyes. But it wasn't enough, not yet. I rushed to the hospital, the sterile smell of disinfectant doing nothing to calm the roaring in my ears. I found Nian Nian in a VIP suite, her face flushed, a thin foreline in her hand. Mommy, she whispered, her voice tiny. Is Daddy coming? My heart squeezed. Even now, after everything. She wanted the man who had ignored her for 4 years. I pulled out my phone and dialed Xian's private number. Xiang, I said when he picked up, Nian Nian is in the hospital. She has a 40-degree fever. She's asking for you, please, just this once. Be a father. There was a pause on the other end. I heard muffled voices. Yi Wei's voice. I can't, Shanshan, he said, his tone tight. Yi Wei had a panic attack after the news broke about the diamond. The paparazzi are surrounding her apartment. I have to manage the PR. I'll send Assistant Lin with some toys for Nian Nian later. A panic attack, I repeated, a cold laugh escaping my lips. Your daughter is in a hospital bed with an 4. And you're worried about your mistress's panic attack. You're the one who caused this mess. Shanshan, you sold the house. You leaked the diamond story. You don't get to play the victim now. Stay at the hospital. We'll talk when I've fixed what you broke. He hung up. I stared at the phone. The final thread, the one that had held a tiny, foolish hope for Nian Nian's sake, snapped. Is Daddy coming? Nian Nian asked again, her eyes fluttering. No, baby, I said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Daddy is busy, but it's okay, because we're going to a place where we don't have to wait for anyone ever again. I sat by her bed for 3 hours, watching the drip of the 4. During those 3 hours, I wasn't just a mother, I was a commander. I messaged Lawyer Song. Is the paperwork ready? Ready and waiting, madam. Song replied, the moment you cross the border, I will file the divorce and the restraining order. Since you have the travel waiver he signed last night, thinking it was insurance, he has no legal grounds to claim international kidnapping. You have full custody for the duration of the health retreat in Switzerland, and the evidence from the gala, the recordings of Madame Lu and the footage of Xiang choosing Yi Wei over the hospital visit have been backed up to 3 secure servers. If he tries to fight the asset transfer, we release it all. He won't fight. He can't afford the hit to the Lu Group's brand. I looked at Nian Nian. Her fever was breaking. She looked so small in the giant hospital bed. Suddenly, the door to the suite burst open. It wasn't Xiang, it was Yi Wei, wearing oversized sunglasses and a silk scarf, followed by a frantic-looking Assistant Lin. Where is he? Yi Wei hissed, looking around the room. Xiang said he was coming here. He left me at the apartment to check on the child. I stood up, moving between her and Nian Nian's bed. He isn't here, Yi Wei. He stayed with you, or at least, that's what he told me. Yi Wei's face contorted. He lied. He used the brat as an excuse to get away from the reporters. She turned to Assistant Lin. Find him. If he's meeting with the board without me, I'm finished. Miss Yi, please, Assistant Lin pleaded. This is a hospital. I walked up to Yi Wei, my eyes burning. Get out, excuse me, she sneered, stepping into my space. You're a homeless divorcee, Shanshan, you have nothing. Xiang is mine now. This child is just a mistake he's trying to erase. I didn't slap her. Slapping was for women who didn't have power. I simply pulled out my phone and played a clip of the recording I had made earlier. Xian's voice echoed in the room. Yi Wei is an asset to the Lu Group's branding. You are a wife who stays at home. Know your place. Yi Wei froze. He doesn't love you. Yi Wei, I whispered. You're a branding asset, and right now, your brand is toxic. The diamond is a rental. The muse is a wine-stained mess. And the man you're chasing just lost his house to his rival. You aren't winning. You're just the next person he's going to liquidate. Yi Wei's mouth hung open. She looked at Assistant Lin, who looked away. The reality of the Lu Group's liquidity crisis, the one I had manufactured, was starting to sink in. Get out of my daughter's room, I said, my voice low and dangerous, before I call security and tell them you're harassing a sick child. Imagine the branding on that headline. Yi Wei backed away, her heels clicking frantically on the linoleum. She fled the room, Assistant Lin trailing behind her with a look of pure pity. I sat back down, my hands were perfectly still. The hospital was quiet now. Outside the window, the city lights of the metropolis I had lived in my whole life looked like a distant, fading galaxy. Mommy, Nian Nian's voice was stronger now. Yes, sweetheart, I'm ready to go to the mountains now. I smiled. I picked up the phone and sent one last message to Mr. Hoffman at the Swiss consulate. The flight is at midnight. We'll be there for the morning briefing. I had sold the house. I had drained the accounts. I had humiliated the mistress and outmaneuvered the mother-in-law. All that was left was the final goodbye, the one where I didn't say a word. Lu Xiang thought he was the one who decided when people stayed and when they left. He was about to learn that the most powerful thing a hidden woman can do is simply stop being there. I looked at the clock. 4 hours until the flight. The exit wasn't a tragedy. It was an art form. The moon was a sharp silver sliver over the city as I returned to the Lu mansion one last time. It was an empty shell, a hollow monument to a man who thought gold could replace blood. I had arranged for the hospital to discharge Nian Nian directly to the airport with Auntie Chen. My task was simpler, yet far more surgical. I had to ensure Lu Xian's pride remained intact just long enough for me to clear the airspace. I walked into the kitchen. I had instructed the temporary staff to prepare a final meal, his favorites, Wagyu steak, truffle risotto, and a bottle of a rare vintage I had saved from the liquidation. When the front door opened, Xiang walked in. He looked ravaged, his tie was gone, his hair was uncharacteristically messy, and he moved with the heavy tread of a man who had spent the day fighting fires. He stopped when he saw the table set, the candles flickering in the drafty, empty dining room. "Shanshan," he asked, his voice cracking. "Where is Nian Nian?" "She's sleeping at a friend's house," I lied smoothly, pulling out a chair for him. "The hospital said she needed a quiet environment. Since our house is currently in transition, I thought it best." He sat down, looking around the room at the bare walls where the $1 million paintings used to hang. "I can fix the house, Shanshan. I've already contacted the lawyers to sue Han for predatory purchasing. I'll get it back, I'll get everything back." "I know you will, Xiang," I said, pouring the wine. The dark red liquid caught the candlelight. "You always do. But tonight, let's not talk about Han or the company, let's talk about the future." He looked at me, a flicker of hope or perhaps just relief crossing his face. "The future, Nian Nian's future," I corrected. I pulled a stack of documents from my bag and laid them on the table. "I realized something at the hospital today. Life is fragile. We need to make sure she's protected. No matter what happens to our marital status." Xiang reached for his glass, taking a deep gulp. "What is this? Insurance and trust fund structures?" I said. "Since you're so worried about weaknesses and vulnerabilities, I've drafted a set of international protection waivers. They ensure that Nian Nian can travel for her health and education without being bogged down by the Lu Group's legal entanglements. It's for her safety, Xiang, so she never has to be a secret again." He flipped through the pages. To a man who dealt in billion-dollar mergers, these looked like standard, boilerplate family office documents. He didn't see the clauses buried on page 24, the ones that granted me unilateral right of residence in Switzerland and acknowledged his voluntary relinquishment of travel veto power in exchange for my silence on the Yi Wei scandal. "You're finally thinking like a Lu," he muttered, his eyes skimming the text. "Protecting the air, good." "I'm thinking like a mother," I replied. "Sign them, Xiang. Let's put the chaos of the last 48 hours behind us. I'll even help you draft the press release to fix the liquidity rumor tomorrow morning." The bait was perfect. Xiang was a man who lived for his reputation. The promise of my cooperation in repairing his image was the only currency he valued more than the house. He picked up the pen, scratch, scratch, scratch. With every signature, he was handing me the keys to our new life. He was signing away his right to stop me at the border. He was signing away the chains he had kept on us for 5 years. "There," he said, tossing the pen onto the mahogany table. "It's done. Now, Shanshan, about Yi Wei. It was a branding exercise that went too far. I've ended it. She's being sent to the regional office in Singapore." I smiled, a cold, sharp thing. "That's very decisive of you. I realized today, when I saw the empty house, I realized I don't want to come home to an empty room." He reached across the table, trying to take my hand. "I've been cold, I know. But the Ice King needs a foundation. You are that foundation." I let him hold my hand. His skin was warm, but I felt nothing, no spark, no anger, not even a trace of the old love. I felt like I was touching a statue. "You're right, Xiang," I said, my voice a soft purr. "A house is just a building. It's the people inside that matter." "Exactly." He stood up, looking more like himself. The ego was returning. "Tomorrow, we'll move into the penthouse at the Four Seasons while I resolve the hand situation. We'll start over, a new image, the perfect family. I have a few things to finish here first," I said. "Go up to the guest room. I'll be up after I pack the last of Nian Nian's things." "Don't be long," he said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. I didn't flinch, but I felt the phantom weight of his condescension like a brand. He walked up the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the hollow mansion. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close. Then, I moved. I didn't pack clothes, I didn't pack jewelry. I went to the kitchen and took my laptop and the signed documents. I went to the foyer and picked up the small, battered suitcase I had hidden behind a loose panel in the coat closet months ago. Inside were our new passports, the Swiss residence permits, and the title deeds to a villa in Interlaken. I looked back at the dining room. The candles were burning low, the wax dripping onto the table like tears. The Ice King was upstairs, dreaming of a comeback, unaware that he was sleeping in a house that didn't belong to him, in a life that was already over. I pulled my phone out and sent a one-word text to the driver waiting 2 blocks away. Now, as I stepped out of the front door, the night air hit me, cold, crisp, and smelling of freedom. I didn't look back at the Lou mansion. I didn't look at the gates. I walked toward the black sedan that pulled up to the curb, its headlights cutting through the darkness. To the airport, I said. The driver nodded. As we pulled away, I opened my laptop. I had one more gift for Xian's morning. I scheduled a public post for 8:00 a.m., the exact time my flight would enter international airspace. It was a photo of the Blue Heart diamond, shattered on a marble floor, with a caption that read, "Some things are too expensive to keep. Some things are too cheap to stay for. Goodbye, Mr. Lou." I leaned back against the leather seat and closed my eyes. For the first time in 5 years, the air in my lungs didn't feel heavy. The terminal was a sprawling labyrinth of glass and cold neon, but to me, it felt like the birth canal of a new life. I stepped out of the black sedan, my heels clicking a rapid, rhythmic pulse against the pavement. I didn't look like a runaway wife. I wore a tailored cream trench coat and dark sunglasses, the very image of a woman who owned the world she was walking through. "Mommy," Nian Nian's voice cut through the hum of the airport. She was sitting on a bench near the VIP check-in, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, her face pale but her eyes bright. Auntie Chen stood beside her, clutching 2 modest suitcases. They contained no designer labels, only Nian Nian's favorite books and the stuffed rabbit she couldn't sleep without. "We're here, baby," I whispered, pulling her into my arms. Her forehead was cool. The fever had broken, leaving behind the clarity of the morning. "Is the man coming?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "No," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "That man is part of a dream we just woke up from. From now on, it's just us." I handed our passports to the agent at the first-class counter. The agent scanned them, her expression professional and blank. She had no idea that the Lin Shanshan on the screen was currently the most searched name in the city's private security databases. "Enjoy your flight to Zurich, Madam Lin," she said, handing back the boarding passes. As we moved toward the gate, my phone began to vibrate in my pocket. It was a frantic, relentless buzzing. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Lu Xiang had likely woken up in that empty, cold guest room to find the house even quieter than he remembered. He would have found the dining room empty, the signed documents gone, and the heavy realization that his foundation had evaporated. I didn't block him. I wanted him to watch. We reached the gate. The massive Boeing 777 sat on the tarmac like a tethered giant. Just as we reached the boarding bridge, a loud commotion broke out behind us. "Lin Shanshan." I froze. I turned slowly to see Lu Xiang sprinting toward the gate. He was disheveled, his shirt untucked, his face a mask of primal, wounded rage. He was being held back by 2 airport security officers, but his eyes were locked on me. "Shanshan, stop," he roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You can't do this. You have no right to take my daughter." The passengers around us began to murmur, phones being raised to record the Ice King having a public meltdown. I didn't run. I walked back toward the security line, stopping just out of his reach. I pulled the documents he had signed last night from my bag and held them up against the glass partition. "Read the fine print." "Xiang," I said, my voice amplified by the strange silence of the crowd, "you signed a voluntary travel waiver and a residency agreement. In the eyes of the law, both here and in Switzerland, I am not taking her. I am relocating her for her health and educational well-being, as per your signed authorization." "I didn't know," he screamed, struggling against the guards. "You tricked me. You used Nian Nian to manipulate me." "No, Xiang," I said, stepping closer to the glass. "I used your ego to outmaneuver you. You were so busy trying to save your branding that you forgot to look at what you were actually losing. You told me to know my place. This is it. My place is anywhere you are not. I will find you." His voice cracked, a sound of genuine desperation. "I will freeze every cent. I will make sure you never work again. You can't freeze what isn't in your jurisdiction, I said calmly. The house is Hans, the cash is in Zurich, and as for my work was being your wife. I've retired. I turned my back on him. Mommy, why is he shouting? Nian Nian asked, her small hand tightening in mine. He's just saying goodbye, sweetheart, I said. But he's forgotten how to use his nice voice. We walked down the boarding bridge. The sound of Xian's shouting faded, replaced by the low, pressurized hum of the aircraft. As I settled Nian Nian into her seat and the flight attendant offered us warm towels, I felt the plane begin to push back from the gate. I pulled out my phone one last time. It was 8:00 a.m. The scheduled post went live. Across the city, every news outlet, every social media feed, and every board member of the Lu Group received the notification. The photo of the shattered diamond, the recording of Mother Lu's cruelty, the hospital records of Xian's absence. The invisible wife had just dropped a nuclear bomb on the Lu Group's public image. I watched the signal bars on my phone drop to zero as the plane taxied toward the runway. A final text message managed to squeeze through from Assistant Lin. The board has called an emergency session. They are demanding Mr. Lu's resignation. Shanshan, what have you done? I didn't reply. I turned the phone off and tucked it into the seat pocket. The engines roared, a powerful, surging force that pressed us back into our seats. I looked out the window as the wheels left the ground. The city, the gold-plated cage that had held me for 5 years, shrank into a grid of tiny, insignificant lights. The Lu mansion was down there somewhere, a hollow box owned by a rival, filled with the ghost of a man who thought he was a king. Look, Mommy, Nian Nian whispered, pointing at the clouds as we pierced through the morning mist into the bright, endless blue. The sun is following us, it's not following us, Nian Nian, I said, unbuckling my seatbelt and leaning back. We're finally catching up to it. I closed my eyes. The silence of the cabin was beautiful. It wasn't the pressurized, heavy silence of the Lu mansion. It was the silence of a clean slate. Lu Xiang was on the ground, surrounded by the ruins of his reputation and a house that wasn't his. I was at 30,000 feet, heading toward a mountain range that didn't know the name Lu. The invisible wife was gone. The woman who replaced her was finally breathing. The air in Interlaken didn't just smell like oxygen. It smelled like expensive wood smoke, pine needles, and the terrifying, exhilarating scent of absolute autonomy. I stood on the balcony of my new villa, a glass and stone marvel perched on the edge of Lake Brienz. Below me, the water was a deep, impossible turquoise, reflecting the snow-capped peaks of the Eiger and the Jungfrau. I was no longer Lin Shanshan, the hidden mistake of the Lu family. My Swiss bank accounts and legal identity were now tied to Elena Lin, an independent investor with a diversified portfolio that made the Lu Group's recent losses look like amateur hour. Elena, the school representative is here, Auntie Chen called from the living room. She looked 10 years younger in her wool cardigan, her face free of the constant anxiety that had haunted her in the Lu mansion. Coming, I said, taking one last breath of the crisp alpine air. The representative from the Institut La Rosie, the most prestigious school in the world, sat on my linen sofa. She was looking at Nian Nian, who was currently playing with a wooden train set by the fireplace. Nian Nian's cheeks were rosy, her laughter ringing out without the hushed, fearful tone she used to carry. She is a delightful child, Madam Lin, the representative said, and her records. Well, we understand the health retreat was necessary. Here, her privacy is our highest priority. No cameras, no paparazzi, no secrets. She is just Nian Nian. That's all I've ever wanted for her, I said, signing the enrollment papers with a steady hand. Once the representative left, I opened my laptop. It had been 2 weeks since I left. The news from home was a digital wildfire. Headline: Lu Group stocks plummet 40% following CEO's resignation demand. Subheadline: Empty mansion scandal. New owner CEO Han reveals Lu Xiang was living in a ghost house 4 days. I scrolled through the images. There was one of Lu Xiang caught by a telephoto lens outside his corporate headquarters. He looked haggard. The Ice King looked like he had been thawed out and left to rot in the sun. He was currently embroiled in 3 separate lawsuits, one from his board for misleading asset declarations, one from Yi Wei for breach of contract and emotional distress. She was trying to sue him for the rental diamond scandal, and a final, devastating inquiry into his tax filings. The liquidity crisis I had manufactured had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because I had drained the personal accounts he used as collateral, his creditors had panicked. He wasn't broke. But his wealth was frozen in a legal glacier. My phone, a new Swiss number, vibrated. It was an encrypted message from Lawyer Song. He found the trail. He knows you're in the Bernese Oberland. He's been trying to hire private investigators, but the Swiss privacy laws are blocking his every move. However, he just chartered a private jet. He's desperate. Elena, he's coming for the assets, meaning you and the child. I looked at Nian Nian. She was happy. She was safe. I felt a flicker of the old fear, but I quickly crushed it. I wasn't the girl in the navy silk dress anymore. Let him come, I whispered to the screen. 3 days later, the quiet of my mountain sanctuary was broken by the sound of a luxury SUV crunching up the gravel driveway. I didn't hide. I walked out onto the porch, wearing a thick cashmere wrap and boots that were made for walking on ice. Lu Xiang stepped out of the car. He looked like a ghost of the man I married. His designer coat was rumpled, his eyes were bloodshot, and he hadn't shaved. He looked at the villa, then at me, his expression a chaotic mix of relief, fury, and a bizarre, belated longing. Shan, he rasped, stepping toward me. My name is Elena, I said, my voice projecting across the lawn. And you are trespassing on private property, Mr. Lu. Trespassing, he laughed, a jagged, broken sound. I am your husband. That is my daughter in there. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? My mother is in the hospital with a heart condition. The company is being carved up by Han, and I'm being investigated by the authorities. I didn't do those things to you, Xiang, I said, leaning against the porch railing. Your choices did. You chose to hide your family. You chose to prioritize a muse over your sick child. You chose to treat your wife like a line item on a balance sheet. I just moved the decimal point. I loved you, he roared, his voice cracking, in my own way. I provided everything for you. You provided a cage, I countered, and you forgot that cages have doors. You thought I was part of the furniture. You forgot that even furniture can be sold. He lunged toward the stairs, but 2 burly Swiss security guards I had hired stepped out from the shadows of the doorway. They didn't need to say a word. Their presence was a wall. Xiang stopped, his chest heaving. You can't keep me from her. I have rights, in China, perhaps, I said, pulling a leather folder from the table beside me. But you signed those rights away in that dining room. The Swiss courts have already recognized my sole custody based on the abandonment and emotional neglect evidence I provided, including your refusal to visit the hospital. You are a stranger here, Xiang. A stranger with a very public reputation for instability. He looked at the guards, then back at me. I saw the moment the reality sank in. He had come here thinking he could reclaim his property with a stern word and a flash of his checkbook. He didn't realize that in this country, his checkbook was useless and his word meant nothing. I'll stay, he said, his voice dropping to a pathetic whisper. I'll check into a hotel in town. I'll wait. I'll show you I've changed. Do what you want, I said, turning back toward the door. But don't come near this house again. My lawyers have a restraining order ready to be served if you so much as breathe on my fence line. Shan, he called out, please, just let me see Nian Nian for 5 minutes. I paused at the door. Nian Nian is busy, Xiang, she's learning how to speak French, she's learning how to ski, she's learning how to be a person who isn't a secret. She doesn't have 5 minutes for a ghost. I walked inside and closed the heavy oak door. The click of the lock was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I went to the kitchen and began preparing a hot chocolate for Nian Nian. Through the window, I watched Xiang stand in the driveway for a long time, a small, dark figure against the vastness of the mountains. He looked so insignificant. For years, he had been the sun around which my world orbited. Now, he was just a speck of dust on a windshield. Auntie Chen came in, looking worried. Is he gone? Not yet, I said, stirring the chocolate. But his realizing that the Ice King doesn't have any power in a place where everything is already frozen. He's just a man in the cold now. That evening, as the sun set behind the peaks, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, I sat with Nian Nian on the rug. We were looking at a map of the world. Where are we going next, Mommy? She asked. Wherever we want, Nian Nian. The whole world is open now. I looked at my phone. A news alert popped up. Lu Xian's luxury assets seized in final liquidation. I deleted the notification. I didn't need to know his ending to know my beginning. The house in Interlaken was warm, the fire was bright, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for a door to open. I was the one who held the key. The Swiss Alps in winter are unforgivingly beautiful, a landscape of jagged white peaks and air so sharp it feels like drinking diamonds. I stood on the terrace of the St. Moritz Equestrian Club, wrapped in a floor-length white faux fur coat. Below me, the white turf horse races were in full swing, thoroughbreds thundering across the frozen lake, their hooves kicking up clouds of powdered ice. I wasn't here for the races, I was here for the kill, Madam Lin. A familiar voice rumbled behind me. I turned to see CEO Han, the man who had bought my mansion in China. He looked invigorated, holding a crystal flute of champagne. You look radiant. Freedom suits you better than that navy silk ever did. Business suits me even better, Mr. Han, I replied with a thin smile. I heard you've been busy dismantling the Lu Group's supply chain. With your help, of course. Han toasted me. The shares you offloaded to my holding company gave me the leverage I needed. Lu Xiang is bleeding out, but he's stubborn. He's still clinging to the core tech patents. Not for long, I whispered. At that moment, the crowd near the paddock parted. Lu Xiang appeared. He looked like a shadow cast against the snow. He had lost weight. His high cheekbones were now razor-sharp, and his eyes were hollowed out by months of legal battles and sleepless nights. He had tracked me here, breaking the unofficial distance my lawyers had enforced. He looked desperate. A man who had traveled halfway across the world not to reclaim a wife, but to find a soul he had misplaced. He stopped 10 feet away from me. The socialites around us, sensing the tension, began to whisper. In this circle, I was Elena Lin, the mysterious venture capitalist. To him, I was the ghost that had ruined him. Shanshan, he said, his voice barely audible over the wind. Mr. Lu, I greeted him, my voice projecting a cool, polite indifference. I believe you're in the wrong VIP section. This area is reserved for the club's major shareholders. I don't care about the club. He stepped forward, his hands trembling. I've spent 3 months trying to get past your lawyers. I've seen the filings. You're the one backing Han. You're the one who leaked the internal audits to the Zurich regulators. Why? I gave you a life of luxury for 5 years. Why are you trying to destroy me? I'm not destroying you, Xiang, I said, taking a sip of my drink. I'm just reclaiming the interest on the years you stole from me. You treated our marriage like a transaction. I'm simply closing the books. Mommy. Look at the big horse. Nian Nian ran toward me from the stables, led by a professional riding instructor. She was dressed in a miniature equestrian outfit, her hair glowing in the sun. She looked healthy, vibrant, and utterly fearless. Xiang froze, his eyes filled with a sudden, painful light as he looked at his daughter, Nian Nian. He dropped to one knee, reaching out a hand. Nian Nian, it's Daddy. Do you remember? I brought you that big rabbit. Nian Nian stopped. She looked at the man on the ground, her head tilting in confusion. There was no flicker of recognition, no rush of joy. She looked at him the way a child looks at a stranger who is acting strangely. Mommy, who is the sad man? She asked, stepping back toward my side and clutching my coat. The silence that followed was more brutal than any insult I could have hurled. Xian's hand stayed frozen in the air, his face crumpled, a raw, naked agony breaking through the Ice King persona. To be hated by me was one thing. To be forgotten by the child he had kept in the shadows was a total erasure of his existence. Nian Nian, it's me, he choked out, his voice thick with tears. I'm your father. Nian Nian looked up at me, seeking guidance. I knelt down and smoothed her hair. This is a man from our old life. Sweetheart, he's someone who didn't know how to be a father when it mattered. You don't have to talk to him if you don't want to. I want to go see the horses. Nian Nian said firmly, not sparing him another glance. She turned and ran back toward the paddock. Xiang stayed on his knees in the snow. The elite of the international business world watched as the once mighty CEO of the Lu Group was rejected by a 4-year-old. I stood over him, my shadow falling across his face. You wanted to see her, Xiang. There she is. She is happy. She is loved. And she doesn't know your name. That is the price of your secrecy. He looked up at me, his eyes wet. I'll give it all up, the company, the patents, the pride. Just let me be in her life. Shanshan, please, I'll sign anything. You already signed everything, I said, my voice hardening. And you're about to sign one more thing. Han is making a final offer for the Lu Group's core patents this afternoon. If you refuse, I will release the full transcript of your mother's medical history, specifically the part where she admitted to faking her heart condition to manipulate the court. The scandal will finish what's left of your family's name." Xiang stared at me. He realized then that I wasn't just a woman who had run away, I was the architect of his total obsolescence. I had taken his house, his money, his reputation, and now, I was taking his legacy. "You've become just like me," he whispered, a bitter smile touching his lips. "Cold, calculating, ruthless." "No, Xiang," I said, stepping past him toward the warmth of the clubhouse. "I didn't become you. I became the person you should have been afraid of from the very beginning. You taught me how to value assets. I just realized that you were my most appreciated one." I walked away, the sound of the horses' hooves echoing like a drumroll for his ending. As I entered the glass-walled lounge, "Mr. Han approached me with a tablet. "He's signing," Han said, his voice hushed with awe. "The Lu Group is officially dead. You're a very dangerous woman." "Elena, no," I said, watching Nian Nian through the window as she petted a white stallion. "I'm just a mother who finally finished her chores. The conflict wasn't over, but the victory was." Xiang was a ghost in the snow, a man who had everything and understood nothing. I turned my back on the window and the man outside. Heading toward the table where my future was waiting, the final battlefield was a glass-walled boardroom on the top floor of the Bergenstock Resort, suspended high above Lake Lucerne. The architecture was aggressive, sharp angles of steel and transparent floor panels that made it feel as though we were floating over an abyss. Below us, the clouds drifted lazily, but inside, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of a dying empire. I sat at the head of the long obsidian table. I was no longer the assistant or the hidden wife. I was the primary shareholder of the New Horizon Fund, the entity that had systematically swallowed the Lu Group's debt and equity over the last 12 months. The double doors swung open. Lu Xiang entered, flanked by a team of exhausted-looking lawyers. He was dressed in a black suit, but it hung loosely on his frame. The arrogance that once defined the set of his shoulders had been replaced by a grim, hollowed-out resignation. "You kept me waiting," he said, his voice a rasping echo of his former baritone. "I've spent 5 years waiting for you." "Xiang," I replied, not rising from my seat. 10 minutes is a courtesy you can afford." I gestured to the seat at the far end of the table. He sat, staring at the digital contract projected onto the center of the glass. It was the final merger and liquidation agreement. Once he signed this, the Lu Group, a 3-generation dynasty, would cease to exist. It would be absorbed into my holdings. "Shanshan, Elena," he corrected himself, his eyes searching mine for a flicker of the woman who used to cook his dinner and wait for the sound of his car in the driveway. "Is this really necessary? You have the money, you have the daughter, you have the life in Switzerland. Why take the name? Why destroy the work of my grandfather? Your grandfather built a legacy based on integrity," I said, sliding a tablet toward him. "You turned it into a shell game. You used the company's power to hide your family and protect your mistresses. You made the Lu name synonymous with a liquidity crisis and a rental diamond. I'm not destroying the name, Xiang, I'm putting it out of its misery." He looked at the screen. On it was a final gift I had prepared, a leaked video of Mother Lu and Yi Wei from a hidden camera in the guest wing of the old mansion. They were laughing, clinking glasses, and discussing how they would train Nian Nian to be a silent pawn and how they would eventually replace me with a woman of higher breeding once the merger was complete. Xiang watched the screen, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. He hadn't seen this. He hadn't known that while he was working, the 2 women he protected were plotting to dismantle the only real things in his life. They said they liked you," he whispered, his hands trembling on the table. "They liked my silence." I countered, "But as you've discovered, silence is a very expensive resource, and I've run out." I signaled to my lawyer, who handed Xiang the stylus. "Sign it, Xiang. In exchange, I will pay off the remaining personal lawsuits against you. I will provide you with a modest monthly stipend, enough for a quiet life in a provincial city. But you are banned from the board, you are banned from the industry, and you will never hold a majority share in anything again." He looked at the stylus as if it were a dagger. "And Nian Nian is legally a Lin now. She has no connection to the Lu Group. She will grow up knowing she is the heir to a fortune her mother built, not a secret her father hid. Xiang closed his eyes, a single tear escaped. Tracking through the lines of exhaustion on his face, he was the Ice King who had finally realized he was made of water, and he was evaporating in the heat of my resolve. He signed. The digital signature glowed green. Transaction confirmed. He stood up, looking smaller than I ever thought possible. I lost everything because I couldn't see you. I thought you were the background, and I was the subject. A common mistake, I said, standing up to meet his gaze. But the background is what defines the subject. Without me, you were just a man in an empty room. Now, you're just a man. He turned to leave, but he stopped at the door. Can I see her, one last time? I just want to tell her I'm sorry. No, I said, my voice as firm as the mountains outside. Apologies are for the people who stay. You're just a ghost now, Xiang, and ghosts don't get to speak to the living. As he walked out, the heavy doors thudded shut. The Lu group was gone. The revenge was complete. But as I stood there, looking out over the blue expanse of Lake Lucerne, I realized that the satisfaction didn't come from his ruin. It didn't come from the money or the power. It came from the silence, a different kind of silence this time, not the pressurized silence of the Lu mansion, but the peaceful, sovereign silence of a woman who had finally found her own voice. I walked out of the boardroom and down to the resort's private garden. Nian Nian was there, running through the alpine flowers, chasing a butterfly. She was wearing a bright yellow dress, a splash of color against the green. Mommy, she shouted, running toward me. Look, I found a secret path. Is it a good path, baby? I asked, picking her up and feeling the solid, warm weight of her. It goes all the way to the lake, she said, pointing toward the horizon. Can we go? Yes, I said, kissing her cheek. We can go anywhere. The invisible wife was a character in a book I had closed and burned. I looked at the sun setting behind the Pilatus mountain, the sky turning a deep, triumphant gold. I had sold the house, I had moved the mountains, and I had reclaimed my soul. I wasn't a great female lead in a story anymore. I was the author of my own life. I took Nian Nian's hand, and together, we walked down the path, leaving the glass towers and the ghosts of the past behind us. The air was cold, the path was steep, but for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I was going.